I'm going to share with you 4 reasons that as we move toward the winter months, people are more prone to being depressed, and also how to fix it. Hey everybody, Chad Cruiser here with Health and Homestead. And if you want to learn more about physical health and mental health, hit the subscribe button. This time of year, people are more prone, as we move toward October, November, December, people are more prone to depression. It's called seasonal affective disorder. And roughly 6% of people struggle with this. And obviously, as you get more toward the far north, if you live in the northern hemisphere, you're more prone to having this form of depression. And the main reason that we typically think of, and most people recognize this, is because as we move toward this time of year, there's less sunlight. The sun goes down very early, and as a result, many people end up struggling with this seasonal affective disorder. Now, this is only one aspect. We're going to look at 3 important factors that you may never have thought of, so you don't want to miss those. Some of the other things that people struggle with SAD or seasonal affective disorder, they begin to feel sluggish, they begin to put on weight often, and obviously the depression we've already mentioned. What can we do about it? The researchers have tried different things, and one of the things that they suggest is that you need a BLT. Now, it's not a bacon, lettuce, and tomato. It is something called bright light therapy. Now, this is the first line therapy, the first modality that we're talking about here, that researchers have found that having these specially designed light boxes, if you live in a region that's too far north where you just don't get enough sunlight, or if you're in a very cloudy region. I've lived in different places across the country. I've traveled all around the United States, and whether it's Maine or Michigan or Portland, Oregon, these areas are just filled with a lot of darkness in the winter, and there's a lot of this seasonal affective disorder there. And so I've also lived in the country of Iceland and Norway, and when you get that far north, it gets very, very dark, and I decided after living in Iceland that if I ever went back, I would have a light, and I ended up buying a light some years ago. Now, this is an older model. Now they have much newer ones, and it's interesting that the research shows that this BLT, this bright light therapy, is extremely successful at beginning to fight off these winter blues, and the research shows that it begins to benefit in one day. Literally, almost within minutes of using it, people begin to feel different. And so they've tried it. Now, what they reveal is that these light boxes need to be what are called 10,000 lux. It's a certain level of brightness, and 10,000 LUX. And what they reveal is that they've tried 20 minutes of this light. By the way, you don't stare at the light. It's just like sunlight in the sense that it's not just like sunlight, but similar. You don't stare at the sun for the benefit of sunlight. It just hits you from an angle, and so too you put the box next to you and it hits you from an angle, and you could be reading a book or doing your homework or eating breakfast or what have you, but you put it off to the side. But these lights, like I said, they have to be 10,000 lux to have the proper therapeutic effect. But they've tried both kind of a full spectrum bright white, and they've also tried the cool lights, and they've also tried red light, and they've tried blue light. What have they found? The full spectrum lights work well, and also the blue light works equally well. The red light doesn't have the benefit. So you can actually buy blue lights or the full spectrum light, and they found that using them for 20 minutes causes a benefit, 40 minutes causes even greater benefit, and 60 minutes is no better than 40 minutes. So you can set some of them. I think this one here, maybe you can set it for 45 minutes and it just turns off on its own. There's various different kinds. Here's a video of my friend Scott, and he actually uses this. He said it really helps him to wake up in the morning. He said normally when he wakes up, he struggles feeling like he needs to go back to sleep, so he'd go on a treadmill and these kind of things. But putting on these glasses actually help him have energy in the morning, and so he doesn't feel like he has to go out and do something like that. And he also looks like a superhero, so you can imagine you get to look super cool wearing these things. These are the blue lights. And this is something, and actually I have an affiliate link down below in the description if you have any interest. Now, purchasing it shouldn't cost you anything extra, but it actually helps me out. And then I have another one, just a much cheaper model. The blue lights, for the eyes, they're quite expensive, but the other ones are really, really relatively cheap. And so if you need this, this is something that's very beneficial for you. And here's the actual study if you want to go look at the research there. This is not a new concept. You may have think, oh, this is great that researchers have discovered this, but this has been known for thousands of years that there is a mental benefit, a blessing that comes to light therapy. We read in the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 11, verse 7, "Truly the light is sweet, and a pleasant thing it is for the eyes to behold the sun." Isn't that beautiful? There is something sweet about being out in the sunlight. Now, listen, if you can get outside and get good sunlight, that's fantastic. But for those of us who can't, or it could be that you work, and you work from basically when the sun is coming up to when the sun goes down, so you don't really get that good sunlight. Having something like this could literally change your fall and your winter. Now, like I said, this bright light therapy, the BLT, is the frontline, first-line therapeutic modality that the researchers suggest, medical professionals suggest. But there's a second thing that the researchers have looked at, and it has to do with exercise. Now, dealing with exercise, I want to share with you a study that was not dealing specifically with seasonal affective disorder, and then we're going to look at one that was with seasonal affective disorder, but this is called the SMILE study, the Stanford Medical Intervention and Long-Term Exercise Trial. It was a 16-week trial with 156 patients put into 3 different groups. There was the Zoloft group, which is a pharmaceutical medication. Then there's a group that did exercise, and then there was a group that exercised and took the depression medication Zoloft. The exercise group was to exercise for 30 minutes to 70 to 85% of their target heart rate. You can look up for yourself what your target heart rate is of 70 to 85% on Google. They did this 3 times a week, and all had a drop in depression. Nearly half of each group were no longer depressed. An additional 13% had less symptoms, but were not totally depression-free. 6 months later, the exercise group was doing the best. 55% of the mixed group was depressed 6 months later. I find it strange that, sadly, for whatever reason, and I don't know the causal factor in why exercising and the depression medication, that group ended up doing the worst. Then secondarily, you had 52% of the medication group. That's probably not a statistically significant difference there, but notice when it comes to the exercise group, only 30% of the exercise group were depressed 6 months later. Now, this is fantastic news. So for you, simply exercising could make a massive benefit in struggling with depression. Now, this study, like I said, did not have to do with seasonal affective disorder, but we're going to look at one that does have to do with exercise and seasonal affective disorder, and does it work for someone in that category? As we move toward the fall and we finally come into the winter, Fitbit is obviously keeping track of, thousands and maybe hundreds of thousands or maybe more people. They're keeping track of the amount of steps that they take. No surprise here. They found that people exercise less in the winter than in the summer. Now, you would have figured that, but you have to actually put it to the test to prove that it's true, and sure enough, it is true that people exercise less in the winter. But let's look at some research. They did some research on exercise versus light therapy. Research was conducted looking at women who had seasonal affective disorder and comparing light therapy to cardiovascular exercise. The cardio group included 5 minutes of warm-up, then 10 minutes of basic pedaling, then 10 minutes of pedaling to 75% of their target heart rate. And it turns out that both exercise and light therapy had an equally significant impact on helping seasonal affective disorder. So what the researchers are actually sharing with us is that bright light therapy is beneficial, but exercise is just as beneficial. And so you might think, oh, I can do one or the other. You sure can. But how much better if you do 2 healing modalities instead of just using one, right? Instead of saying, what's the least amount of things I can do to feel not depressed? Well, I guess one might make a big difference, but what if you actually put all of the modalities together? You may not just be not depressed, you might actually become significantly happier. What if you could be 10% or 20% happier? Wouldn't that be kind of nice? Or what about 50% happier, right? Putting these things together may have an even greater impact than just using one of them alone. There may be some form of synergy. But let's not stop here. Let's talk about the third thing. This is your chronotype. This is the third thing that may be impacting your seasonal mood or the seasonal blues or the winter blues. So what is a chronotype? Well, your preference for either being a night owl or an early bird when it comes to sleep may affect your chances of depression. And they talk about this as being your chronotype, your time type. Are you an early bird? Are you a night owl, or are you somewhere in between? These are the three things they talk about. And research conducted looking at the Nurses' Health Study 2 looked at over 30,000 women and their penchant, their proclivity to either being early birds, intermediate type sleepers, or night owls. Now it turned out that those who were early birds had the lowest chances of depression. Now if you think about that within the context of seasonal affective disorder, there's something about the summer. Like when I lived in Iceland, the sun wouldn't go down until after midnight, and people would be out maybe mowing their lawn at 11 o'clock at night. Because you just don't feel like going to bed. You just don't have that desire. It just feels like, hey, it's daytime. And then when winter comes and the sun goes down, I don't know, like 2 o'clock in the afternoon or something like that, and it comes up at, I don't know, 9 or 10 in the morning, you just feel like sleeping. And so there's something about the light that makes us feel like sleeping or not feel like sleeping. This is something to think about, that in the winter months, as the sun goes down significantly earlier, you feel often like going to bed earlier. Now, people cover that up with things like caffeine and whatnot, which is not the healthiest way to deal with it at all, actually. It's not really very healthy. And so, but letting our bodies actually function towards sleeping when they should be sleeping, which is earlier. And it turns out Dr. Nedley he has a clinic on reversing depression out in Weimar, California, and they have an unbelievable success rate, something like 99% success rate at lowering people's depression within a 10-day period. I mean, it's really amazing what they have. And one of the key modalities that they specifically work with is using sleep therapy. Well, what is that? Well, it's specifically turning people's rhythm, their circadian rhythm, toward what it actually should be, closer to the 9 o'clock hour for sleeping. You say, I'm not willing to do that, and I wasn't either. I used to stay up until 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I had to go to school and those kind of things, and then in the summer, then I would sleep in, and I never felt all that good. I really didn't. And then when I began to do this, going to bed between 9 and 9:30, we may think, oh, this is just my physiology. It's just who I am. Not really. Actually, when you change, you start feeling better. Your body starts functioning the way it was designed to function, and you feel like a different person. Now, that doesn't happen in one night, especially because it takes a little while for your sleep cycle to change. If you're used to going to bed at 2 o'clock and then all of a sudden you go to bed at 9, you just lie there and you can't sleep at all. And so it's kind of terrible. But if you consistently get up at a good hour, get up nice and early, your body will start to feel like going to bed earlier. And as a result, once it gets into that cycle, that circadian rhythm, which means circa, about, DN referring to a day, this is that 24-hour cycle. And when we're letting our body roll with the cycle that it actually was designed to function in, we just start feeling better. So that's the third modality, is getting good regular sleep at an earlier hour, sometime between 9 and 10, 9 being even better if you really struggle with depression, especially in the winter. But let's go on to our fourth modality. This one may actually surprise you. Now, think about this. Some of these things, so exercise, people are less prone to exercising as much in the winter. In the summer, they exercise more. People who exercise more are happier people. So you can see how just the functions of our body are not working as well in the winter. And the fourth modality has to do with the kind of air you breathe. Now, in the summer, people are also more prone to having their windows open, When your window is open, something happens. Something comes in your window that actually benefits your mental health. Now, my wife and I, we are documentary filmmakers, and a number of years ago, we made a film called Ancient Health. It's archaeology, history, and cultures of longevity. And what are the principles that, the activities and the lifestyle that the longest living groups of people do? What do they do that makes them so healthy and happy even into their older years? And I want to share with you just a short clip on this idea of air and some of the benefits of a certain kind of air. Check this out.
Let's talk a little bit about air. Air being one of the, the acronym in New Start, the A is for air.
And of course, we're speaking about good fresh air. What's surprising to many people in the urban environments in which the majority of the world's population lives is that many of us are deprived of this very important commodity.
There's actually good air and bad air.
We know that foul air in the cities will, for example, double heart attack rates, which is a big problem.
If you go into a congested city environment, you actually don't, you kind of feel a little down. You're a little gloomy. The air is just not as fresh as compared to going along a mountain stream with this river that's cascading down the mountains and the birds are singing. The sense that you have there, and why is that?
In these environments, there are negatively charged air ions.
We can go out on the trails and just breathe in just good air, good quality air.
The air around waterfalls, lakes, oceans, pine trees, cedar trees, mountains, that negatively charged air is good for you. It's actually positive for you.
Have you ever noticed how good you feel after a thunderstorm or after being by the ocean surf? The reason again is that these environments create and have the highest concentration of negative ions available.
These negatively charged ions have a mood elevating effect.
Out there, the light rain, when the rain comes down, the negative ions go up. All of that fresh air, anytime you can get out in the fresh air, you're going to be better for it mentally and physically.
The brain needs oxygen. The nerve cells need oxygen to function adequately. And when you're not sitting up straight, when you're not breathing deeply, then your tissues are going to be lacking oxygen and you're going to start feeling tired and fatigued.
When we have this, oxygenation that's increased, it really does improve our mental ability and you just feel much better. I mean, you feel like, man, my mind is clear.
And so it's very important that we get that fresh air as we want to improve our mental health and our cognitive performance.
So getting enough fresh air is actually valuable, and the quality of air is also very important.
So my prescription for health would include getting out into nature. Get out after a thunderstorm and walk. Go by the ocean, surf. Go to an area that has up in the mountains with lots of trees. Get the best out of the time that you exercise.
The thing is, you can combine these things. If you're drinking water, you're out in the sunshine and you're exercising out in nature and you're getting fresh air, you didn't have to think, well, I just got 4 of the 8 natural laws and I thought I was just walking out in nature.
One of the 8 natural laws of health and longevity amongst some of the longest living people is simply getting fresh air. And one of the things that Dr. Binus, the psychiatrist in the video there, he talked about standing up straight or sitting up straight and getting, healthy inspirations of air. One of the ways to discover how to have good posture, or at least to feel your body that it has good posture, is simply standing there, or you can even do it sitting down if you need to, but just raising your hands up straight and putting them straight back down will put your body into a proper posture. But that's not the most important part of what we're talking about. We're talking about fresh air. And in the winter, what don't people get as much of? Most people don't get as much of the fresh air. Why? Because the windows are shut, and as we breathe in the air, when we breathe it out, we actually cause a positive charge to the ions in the air. And the positive charged air ions are actually negative, and the ones that are negatively charged are actually positive for us. They're actually beneficial for us. And so how can we do that? One of the things that my wife and I do, I even did it earlier today, I did it yesterday, we do it regularly, is even in the winter, we open up our windows from time to time, just not necessarily a real long time, but let some of the fresh air come into the house to give those negative ions that you have outside. We live like next to a national forest, and we live out in the country. But for your average person, you don't want to leave your windows open. If you have a wood stove, you might leave them cracked all the time if it's hot enough with your wood stove. But most people, if they're heating their house, you don't want to let all the heat out. But one of the things that we do consistently, even in the winter, even though sometimes we'll get down to 0 degrees or whatever, we actually crack the window before we go to bed, and it's cracked only in our bedroom, not the whole house, but just in our bedroom. We shut the door so that air doesn't so much, flood the rest of the house. But we keep it cracked in our bedroom every single night through the night. And these 4 things that we have looked at, getting the sunlight, getting the exercise, getting early to bed, and getting the fresh air are 4 components that many times people are missing in a way in the winter months. So I would challenge you, try to implement some of these things, find some of the benefits. If you need one of the lights, like I said, check out the affiliate links down in the description. But try some of these things, get some exercise, and you don't even need the light. Often you can just get outside. We try to do that, go on a hike, or go on a walk, get outside every day. It's beneficial for you and for your health. Now, if you like this video, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and share it with your friends. God bless and have a fantastic day.